The Kawanishi H6K Mavis was a very large 4-engine flying boat that saw action throughout the Second World War. It gave invaluable service to the Imperial Japanese Navy, thanks to its exceptional performance, becoming one of the most relevant aircraft of the early Pacific War. During the 1920s and early 30s, Japan bought and copied a large number of Western float planes and flying boats. The Kawanishi company became specialized in creating them, and developed a relationship with the Short Brothers, a British manufacturer known for making the same kind of aircraft. In 1933, Kawanishi had amassed enough experience to make their own designs, and tried to answer the Navy experimental HC large flying boat specification. While their attempt ultimately ended in failure, the Navy recognized Kawanishi's work by issuing the following year an exclusive specification. Named the 9C, it asked for a monoplane flying boat with 4 engines and a range of 2,400 nautical miles at a cruising speed of 120 knots. Following a visit to the Short Brothers company, a team led by designers Yoshio Hachiguchi and Shizuo Kikuhara started working on the new project with the internal designation of Type S. What emerged 2 years later was something quite unique. The H6K, as it was named by the Japanese Navy, was a huge aircraft, being one of the largest ever created up to that point. It had a parasol wing with a span of 40 meters, mounted above the hull and supported by struts in a V-shape. It had a crew of 9, a pilot, a co-pilot, a radio operator, a flight engineer, a navigator, a bombardier, and 3 dedicated gunners. At first, it was powered by 4 840 horsepower Nakajima Hikari 2 9-cylinder air-cooled radial engines. Following its maiden flight on July 14, 1936, and during service trials, the H6K was found to be slightly underpowered. This was soon corrected by re-engineering it with the Mitsubishi Kinzei 43, a 14-cylinder air-cooled radial engine that could develop 1000 horsepower. After passing the trials, the new aircraft entered service in January 1938 and was officially designated the Navy Type 97 Flying Boat Model 1, or H6K1. Full production followed, and the new units received the Model 2 or H6K2 designation, despite having only small internal equipment changes. In addition, 2 were converted to be dedicated staff transports and were named H6K3. The Japanese flying boat saw action for the first time in the Sino-Japanese War, where it was found to be the owner of an exceptional range and endurance, great navigation qualities, and good stability in both air and water. But some flaws were also evident, such as a slow cruising speed of around 130 miles per hour, or the fact that it was, even then, quite vulnerable. Outside the battlefield, it proved to be complex to build and had a large production time. Some of these would become major problems, as we'll see further ahead. It wasn't long until the H6K4 variant, or Model 2-2, was around to try and counteract some of these flaws. This became the H6K's major production variant and was built from 1939 to 1942. The K4 variant almost doubled the fuel capacity. Furthermore, the defensive armament was also overhauled, with the addition of 2 blisters in the beam position bearing each a 7.7mm Type 92 machine gun. 2 more Type 92 MGs could be found in an open bow position and in an open dorsal one. But probably the most important addition brought by this variant was the single 20mm Type 99 cannon in the tail turret. Starting in August 1941, there was also an engine change, with the 1070 horsepower Kinzei 46 replacing the Kinzei 43. When the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor, there were 66 H6K4s in frontline units of the Imperial Japanese Navy, but, despite the scarcity in numbers, they played a very important role in the initial Japanese advances. The Mavis, as it was codenamed by the Allies, had a huge range with an absolute maximum value in excess of 6,000 kilometers. Although in practical terms this distance was unlikely to be reached, let's take a look at it. 6 km is roughly the distance from Orlando, Florida to Anchorage, Alaska, from Lisbon, Portugal to Dubai, United Arab Emirates, or perhaps more fittingly, from Tokyo, Japan to Cairns, Australia. Naturally, such good range was coupled with fantastic endurance, as the Mavis could spend more than 26 hours in the air. In fact, 24-hour reconnaissance missions weren't infrequent. and to allow for those, it had sleeping quarters with 2 beds, a bathroom, and freshwater reserves. The Mavis was incredibly well suited to performing recon missions in the vast oceanic expanses of the Pacific Theater, but it wasn't restricted to those. In the first year of the conflict, it saw considerable use as a bomber, seeing that it could take up to 1,000 kilos in bombs or 2 800-kilo torpedoes. These were carried externally in the wing supporting struts. In addition, its large size also allowed it to carry a great variety of equipment, making it quite good at navigating between islands and acting as a guide for ill-equipped aircraft. In addition, the H6K's powerful radio allowed it to relay messages from smaller recon airplanes that would make reports outside of radio range. It also saw action in a variety of other missions, such as transport and medevac. And so, it quickly became clear that there weren't quite enough of them in the Japanese Navy, a consequence of its lengthy production time. However, this spell of success didn't last forever, and it ended rather quickly when the Japanese started encountering fiercer opposition. A clear example was when, on February 20, 1942, Task Force 11 approached Rabaul from the east, intending on striking the recently occupied Japanese base. In the morning, a Mavis discovered the American task force and quickly reported its position, but, unknown to the Japanese crew, despite being 35 miles away, they were being identified by Lexington's CXAM radar. This allowed the American carrier to guide a pair of F-4F Wildcat fighters, led by the famous Lieutenant Commander John Jimmy Thatch, commanding officer of the VF-3 unit. His own words are a perfect description of what ensued. There was a small opening in the cloud, and as I came into it, I looked down, and not more than 1,000 feet below was a huge wing with a red disc. It was my first sight of an enemy aircraft as close as that, and it nearly scared me to death. Thatch made a run on the Japanese flying boats, and it seems his aim was spot on. The plane was almost completely engulfed in flames, and it hit the water with a huge explosion. The resulting flames could be seen from Lexington's deck more than 30 miles away. Half an hour later, another Mavis went down in similar fashion, and just like that, in a very short period of time, Japan lost 2 aircraft and 18 crewmen. That day would turn out to be catastrophic for the Japanese, with nothing less than 15 brand new G4M1 Betty bombers shot down by Lexington's fighters. But that episode is beyond the scope of this video. Remaining on the Mavis topic, it's easy to explain the huge explosions, since, much like almost all Japanese aircraft of the time, the H6K was unarmored and lacked self-sealing fuel tanks. Its defensive armament was also quite weak, with the 4 rifle-caliber machine guns amounting to very little. Only the 20mm cannon, in the rear turret, would give pause to an American pilot flying a Wildcat fighter. In addition, as shown by this picture of a declassified Technical Air Intelligence Center report, the Americans soon found that the Mavis had no defenses in the 3 and 9 o'clock bearings above and below. The H6K5, a new variant with the more powerful Mitsubishi Kinzhi 51 or 53 engines, rated at 1300 horsepower, did little to change the situation, and toward the end of 1942, the Mavis was gradually pulled away from the front lines, giving way to the much tougher H6K Emily. But its retirement as a frontline aircraft wasn't the end of the line. In fact, it saw action until the last days of the war, now as a dedicated transport. Beyond the H6K3, it had 2 other transport variants, the H6K2-L and 4-L, of which 36 were built. These had all armament removed, increased fuel capacity, cargo compartments ahead of the cockpit and in the far back, a galley behind the cockpit, a midship cabin with 8 seats or 4 beds, and an aft cabin with 10 seats more, taking the passenger limit to a maximum of 18. Beyond the Navy, these transport variants also saw civilian use by the Greater Japan Airlines. All in all, 215 Mavis of all variants were produced, but only a handful survived the war. The Mavis, much like many other Japanese aircraft, achieved its wonderful performance by sacrificing resilience. As such, it was a truly remarkable aircraft from a civilian perspective, but due to its vulnerabilities, a less than ideal combat aircraft. Why such an assessment if other Japanese aircraft, like the acclaimed A6M-0 fighter, suffered from exactly the same flaw? Well, the Zero was small, fast and agile, and in the end one going down meant losing one pilot. The Mavis was very large, slow and cumbersome, and was costing 9 crewmen at a time, something Japan couldn't afford. But the Japanese Navy did learn, and the Mavis' successor, the H6K Emily, was armored and had self-sealing fuel tanks, making it much more difficult to shoot down. In fact, the Emily can be considered one of the best flying boats of the war. Beyond the military outlook, the Mavis was a unique and beautiful aircraft. Do you agree? What's your favorite flying boat? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching.